Tonight, we're going to explore something that sounds hard to believe, but is one of the most surprising truths in Earth's history: Antarctica. You've always known it as a land of ice and snow. Scientists often describe it as the coldest place on the planet. But here's what most people don't realize. When you truly understand what Antarctica used to be, when you grasp how different it once looked, it changes how you see Earth's past. This was not always a frozen desert. It was a place filled with trees, rivers, and life. And by the end of this journey, you're going to understand how Antarctica became what it is today, why scientists know it was once green, and why this ancient story still matters now. Before we go any further, if you enjoy this kind of deep and thoughtful exploration, a quick like or subscribe really helps the channel grow. It's a small thing for you, but it makes a big difference for me. Now, let's begin. Antarctica is often imagined as a vast white desert, a frozen continent of ice and wind, where the sun can vanish for months and the cold is absolute. Its surface is dominated by glaciers, stretching in endless sheets that reflect the pale light of the southern skies. To the casual observer, it seems unchanging, eternal in its frozen silence, an isolated land of extremes. Yet beneath the ice, beneath the layers of snow that can be thousands of meters thick, lies a story that is far older, far warmer, and far more vibrant than the icy world we see today. Millions of years ago, Antarctica was not a barren white expanse. Instead, it was green, lush, and filled with forests that swayed in gentle winds under long days of sunlight. Understanding this hidden past requires stepping back in time, to an era when the land we now call Antarctica was part of a connected southern supercontinent, and the climate was dramatically different from today. The first clues that Antarctica had not always been frozen came from early explorers and scientists in the 19th and early 20th centuries. When expeditions journeyed into the icy interior, they reported strange formations of rock, layers that seemed out of place in a landscape dominated by ice. Fossils were uncovered in the rock strata, fragments of leaves, wood, and plant material preserved in stone. Some of these fossils were recognizable, similar to plants known from warmer continents. The presence of coal beds in certain regions, particularly in the transantarctic mountains, also suggested a past of dense vegetation. Coal forms from ancient plant matter compressed over millions of years. Its existence in Antarctica indicated that, at one time, forests must have grown abundantly, their fallen leaves and decayed wood eventually forming thick deposits beneath the surface. Scientific interest in these fossils grew steadily through the 20th century. Paleobotanists began to classify the plant remains, identifying gymnosperms and ferns, types of plants that today still grow in temperate regions. The spores of these plants were often preserved in fine sediments, providing a microscopic record of the forests that once thrived. Each layer of rock and sediment served as a page in a long story, a record of climatic conditions, soil types, and ecological interactions. By studying these fossils, scientists could begin to reconstruct not only what plants grew there, but also the temperature, humidity, and seasonal variations that characterized the region before the ice arrived. Evidence from Antarctica's southern regions indicated that the continent was once closer to the equator in terms of climate, even if its geographic position remained near the pole. During the time periods now known as the Cretaceous and the Eocene, roughly between 145 million and 34 million years ago, the Earth experienced long intervals of warmth. Polar ice sheets were either absent or much smaller than today. The sun's rays reached the Antarctic land with a gentler angle than today, and the tilt of the planet allowed for long growing seasons. Forests thrived under these conditions, populated by tree ferns, conifers, and the earliest flowering plants. These forests were not tropical in the sense of the Amazon or Congo, but they were temperate and dense, with a diversity of species adapted to polar light cycles and the seasonal extremes of a high-latitude environment. The fossil record also reveals that the soils of ancient Antarctica supported rich ecosystems. Leaf litter, fallen branches, and decomposed wood created layers of organic material that nourished plants and animals alike. In certain regions, preserved peat layers indicate that wetlands and bogs were present, collecting plant debris and creating the conditions for coal formation millions of years later. The distribution of these deposits, combined with paleomagnetic studies that track the position of the continent through time, paints a picture of a landscape that was far more hospitable than the icebound deserts of today. Scientists began to understand that the frozen Antarctic of the present is only a recent chapter in the long history of the continent. The discovery of plant fossils on remote islands off the Antarctic coast also contributed to this understanding. These fossils were remarkably well preserved, often retaining detailed structures of leaves, stems, and seeds. By examining these fossils under microscopes, scientists could identify cell patterns, growth rings, and other indicators of climate. The evidence suggested that forests experienced seasonal variations, with long periods of light and dark, similar to modern high-latitude regions such as Alaska or northern Scandinavia. This meant that plants were adapted not only to warmth, but also to months of low light, a factor that influenced their growth patterns and reproductive cycles. As the fossil record expanded, it became clear that Antarctica was once an ecosystem interconnected with other southern continents. It was part of the supercontinent Gondwana, which included what are now South America, Africa, India, and Australia. Fossil species found in Antarctica had close relatives on these continents, indicating that plant and animal life once spread freely across this larger landmass. This connection helped scientists trace the movement of continents, the history of climate, and the evolution of species in the southern hemisphere. Fossils of the same genus were found thousands of kilometers apart, illustrating how connected the Earth once was and how drastically environments could change over millions of years. Early misconceptions about Antarctica's past often underestimated the diversity and extent of life that had existed there. Explorers initially assumed that the continent had always been a frozen wasteland, a place inhospitable to forests or significant animal life. It was only through careful collection, analysis, and comparison with fossils from other continents that scientists began to see the reality. Antarctica once supported complex forests and ecosystems. Each new fossil discovery challenged previous assumptions, revealing that the continent had experienced profound climate shifts, sometimes warm and forested, sometimes cooler but still green, long before the ice sheets took hold. The layers of rock in Antarctica act like time machines, preserving snapshots of ancient landscapes. Sedimentary rocks often contain the remains of plants that grew along rivers and lakes, showing the paths of waterways that carried nutrients and supported diverse life. Fossilized roots and stumps indicate that trees grew in clusters or forests, while pollen grains provide insight into the seasonal cycles and reproduction of plants. By analyzing these materials, scientists can estimate temperature ranges, rainfall patterns, and even wind directions. The results reveal a world where forests could flourish near the pole, where days could stretch into months of sunlight, and where ecosystems adapted to these extremes. Antarctica's hidden forests are not just relics of the past. They offer crucial insights into how climates and ecosystems respond to change. Understanding how forests survived near the poles during periods of warmth helps scientists predict how modern ecosystems might respond to global warming. The fossil record serves as a guide, showing that even extreme environments can support rich life if conditions are right. Each fossil fragment, each sediment layer, contributes to this understanding, offering a glimpse of the continent's vibrant past. The ice we see today is a relatively new development, formed over the last 34 million years, and the forests that once thrived remind us that Antarctica has not always been the frozen land we know. In this first glimpse of Antarctica's history, we begin to understand that the continent is more than ice and snow. It is a land with a deep memory, a record of forests, rivers, and life that once reached far into the south. The fossil evidence, the sedimentary records, and the coal deposits all speak of a time when Antarctica was green and alive. These discoveries lay the foundation for further study, inviting scientists to explore how geological shifts, climate changes, and the movement of continents shape the forests of Antarctica. By looking beneath the ice, we uncover a world that challenges our assumptions, revealing a past that is as rich and complex as any forested landscape on Earth today. Beneath the surface of Antarctica, deep in its rocks and sediments, the story of its movement unfolds. The continent we see today has not always rested in the position it now holds at the southernmost point of the Earth. Millions of years ago, Antarctica was part of a larger landmass, a supercontinent called Gondwana. Gondwana stretched across the southern hemisphere, connecting what are now Africa, South America, Australia, India, and Antarctica. The continents were not fixed. They drifted slowly over geological time, carried on enormous plates of Earth's crust that floated on the molten mantle below. This process, known as plate tectonics, shaped oceans, mountains, and climates, and it directly influenced the forests that once grew on Antarctica. During the time of Gondwana, Antarctica's climate was milder than it is today. The continent's position was still polar, but the arrangement of land and sea created conditions that trapped warmth and allowed forests to thrive. Shallow seas surrounded the land, moderating temperatures and supporting rich ecosystems. These seas carried nutrients that nourished coastal forests and wetlands, providing water for plants and animals. As the continent slowly separated, the isolation of Antarctica began. The shifting land changed ocean currents and atmospheric circulation, gradually cooling the climate over millions of years. Understanding the movement of Antarctica is key to understanding why its forests eventually disappeared and ice sheets formed. The rocks of Antarctica preserve evidence of this slow drift. Layers of sedimentary rock, formed from ancient soils and river deposits, contain fossils and mineral traces that indicate their latitude and climate. Paleomagnetic studies measure the orientation of magnetic minerals in rocks, revealing the direction and movement of the continent over time. These studies show that Antarctica moved from more temperate positions toward the pole, carrying with it forests and ecosystems that had adapted to changing conditions. The movement was gradual, often just a few centimeters per year, but over tens of millions of years, it placed Antarctica in its present position, where ice dominates the landscape. Mountain ranges in Antarctica also tell a story of shifting land. The Trans-Antarctic Mountains stretch across the continent, dividing East and West Antarctica. These mountains were formed by tectonic forces as the land was uplifted, creating barriers that influenced wind patterns and rainfall. valleys, and riverbeds in these mountains preserve fossilized plants and soils, evidence that forests once grew in sheltered areas. The rising land sometimes trapped water, forming lakes and wetlands that supported diverse vegetation. Each rock layer, each fossil in these mountains, serves as a record of the continent's gradual transformation. The separation of Antarctica from its neighbors had a profound effect on climate. When Australia and South America moved away, the circumpolar ocean currents began to develop. These currents isolated Antarctica from warmer waters, allowing ice sheets to grow over time. Before this isolation, the continent's position and the surrounding seas provided enough warmth for forests to survive even near the pole. Sedimentary evidence shows that rivers, lakes, and swamps once existed in regions that are now ice-covered. Fossil leaves, pollen, and wood found in these deposits confirm that temperate forests thrived despite the high latitude. Coal beds found in various parts of Antarctica also speak to this past. Coal forms over long periods in swampy environments where plant material accumulates and is buried under layers of sediment. The compression and heat over millions of years transform this organic material into coal. These deposits show that forests must have been extensive, covering large areas and contributing to thick accumulations of plant matter. The presence of coal in both East and West Antarctica indicates that these forests were widespread, not just limited to small pockets. Volcanic activity further shaped the land and influenced forest growth. Ancient eruptions deposited layers of ash and lava that sometimes covered forests, preserving plant material in fine detail. The ash layers, when studied, provide insight into the timing of geological events and the environmental conditions at the time. Volcanic soils are often rich in minerals, supporting robust plant growth. Evidence from these layers suggests that volcanic regions in Antarctica supported dense vegetation, adding diversity to the forests. The sediments of Antarctica also contain evidence of rivers and lakes that existed millions of years ago. Sandstones and mudstones show signs of water transport, with ripple marks, crossbedding, and other features typical of river channels. These waters carried nutrients and provided habitats for plants and animals. Fossilized roots and stumps are found near these ancient water bodies, showing that trees grew along riversides, forming corridors of forests. Pollen preserved in these sediments helps scientists reconstruct the types of trees and ferns that once thrived there. Antarctica's geology also reveals periods of stability and disruption. Tectonic forces sometimes caused uplifts and subsidence, changing drainage patterns and the distribution of forests. During stable periods, forests expanded and soils developed. During times of tectonic activity, rivers could shift, lakes could drain or form anew, and forests would adapt or retreat. These geological changes were slow but significant over millions of years, shaping the ecology of the continent. The fossil record captures these fluctuations, showing how forests responded to long-term changes in land and climate. Fossil evidence shows that Antarctica's forests were diverse. Coniferous trees dominated the landscape, alongside tree ferns and early flowering plants. These forests likely resembled temperate forests found today in regions such as New Zealand or southern Chile, with dense undergrowth and open clearings. The composition of species varied depending on location, soil type, and water availability. Mountains, valleys, and coastal plains all offered slightly different habitats, contributing to biodiversity. The combination of geology and climate created conditions where forests could flourish for millions of years. The slow drift of Antarctica also explains the similarity between fossils found there and those on other continents. Glossopteris, a genus of seed-bearing plants, is found in Africa, South America, India, and Antarctica. Its presence across these lands confirms that they were once connected. As the continents separated, species became isolated, and Antarctica's forests evolved independently for millions of years before the climate cooled. This connection highlights the importance of geology in understanding the distribution of life and the history of forests on Antarctica. Glacial deposits provide a contrasting record to the forests. Layers of till, moraines, and erratics show the advance and retreat of ice in later periods. These glacial events came long after the forests had thrived, gradually erasing much of the landscape that had supported vegetation. Comparing glacial deposits with sedimentary layers containing fossils allows scientists to place the forests in time, identifying the intervals when Antarctica was warm and green versus when ice began to dominate. This timing is crucial for understanding the sequence of events that transformed the continent from a forested land to an icy desert. The study of Antarctica's geological shifts is not limited to rocks alone. Modern techniques, such as seismic surveys and satellite imaging, allow scientists to map the structure of the continent beneath the ice. These methods reveal buried valleys, ancient riverbeds, and sedimentary basins that once held forests. By combining these data with fossil evidence, researchers can reconstruct detailed maps of ancient landscapes, visualizing where rivers flowed, where forests stood, and how mountains directed the movement of water and air. Overall, the geological record shows that Antarctica was once a land of movement, change, and warmth. Its forests existed because the continent occupied a favorable position, surrounded by seas, shaped by mountains, and drifting slowly across the Earth's surface. The rocks, sediments, and fossils together tell a story of a continent in motion, where plate tectonics influence climate, ecosystems, and the eventual disappearance of forests. Antarctica's hidden past is written not in ice alone, but in the deep layers of rock and the imprints of life preserved within them. By studying these shifts, scientists gain insight not only into the history of Antarctica, but also into the dynamics of the Earth as a whole. Plate tectonics, climate, and life are interconnected, each influencing the other over immense spans of time. Antarctica's forests existed because the land moved, because the seas flowed differently, and because the mountains rose and fell in a delicate balance. Understanding this relationship helps us appreciate the forces that shape our planet and the fragile conditions that allow forests to flourish, even in the most unexpected places. The story of Antarctica's forests cannot be told without understanding its past climate. The continent we now see as frozen was once much warmer, a reality revealed through careful study of rocks, sediments, and fossilized plants. During the Cretaceous period, roughly between 145 and 66 million years ago, global temperatures were higher than they are today. Carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere were elevated, sometimes reaching 5 to 6 times the levels found in the modern world. These higher concentrations of greenhouse gases trapped heat, keeping polar regions warmer and reducing the temperature difference between the equator and the poles. In such a world, Antarctica could support forests, rivers, and lakes, even in regions now buried beneath thick ice sheets. Evidence for this warmth comes from multiple sources. Sedimentary layers often contain isotopes of oxygen and carbon that serve as natural thermometers, revealing the temperature of the environment when the sediments formed. Fossilized plant material shows that trees could grow in regions with months of darkness, suggesting that winters were mild enough for survival. Ice cores from later periods, although not directly from the Cretaceous, show how temperature and carbon dioxide have fluctuated over millions of years. Combined, these records provide a detailed picture of a greenhouse world, where ice was limited and forests could expand across Antarctica. The Eocene, roughly 56 to 34 million years ago, marked another warm period that allowed forests to flourish. During the early Eocene, global temperatures reached their highest levels in the Cenozoic era. Polar regions were covered with temperate forests, featuring conifers, ferns, and early flowering plants. The length of daylight at these latitudes, with months of sunlight in summer and months of darkness in winter, shaped how plants grew. Trees developed growth rings that reflected these seasonal cycles. Pollen grains preserved in sediments indicate that forests remained productive even during long periods of low light, adapting to polar conditions in ways that allowed life to persist for millions of years. Sedimentary evidence across Antarctica shows patterns consistent with warm, wet conditions. River deposits, lake beds, and swamp sediments reveal environments where water flowed freely and supported diverse plant communities. Fossil leaves and wood fragments found in these layers indicate forests with complex structures, including undergrowth and canopy trees. Coal beds, formed from decomposed plant matter, suggest dense vegetation and the presence of wetlands. Such environments were far removed from the icy desert we see today, instead resembling temperate forests in regions like southern South America or New Zealand. Atmospheric composition played a central role in this warmth. Elevated levels of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases trapped heat and moderated temperatures. The oceans also contributed, storing and redistributing heat across the globe. Warm ocean currents flowed around Antarctica before the continent became isolated by shifting currents, bringing milder conditions to coastal regions. These currents carried nutrients that supported coastal forests and shallow marine life, forming interconnected ecosystems that bridged land and sea. Fossilized soils, or paleosols, reveal additional details about temperature and rainfall. Chemical signatures preserved in these soils indicate consistent precipitation, sufficient to sustain forests over long periods. Root traces and plant debris show that soils were thick and fertile, with layers of organic matter accumulating over time. Seasonal patterns shape the growth of forests, with long summers allowing rapid growth and short winters slowing metabolic processes. Adaptation to light cycles was critical, and plants developed strategies to endure periods of limited sunlight, ensuring survival across the high-latitude continent. Isotope studies provide further insights. Oxygen isotopes in fossilized shells, sediments, and soil carbonates can be used to estimate the temperature of ancient waters and the atmosphere. These studies confirm that polar regions were much warmer than today, with average temperatures likely ranging between 10 to 15 degrees Celsius during certain periods of the Cretaceous and Eocene. Such conditions would have been comfortable for temperate forests, enabling trees to thrive close to the poles. Comparisons with present-day polar climates highlight the stark difference. Today, Antarctica is a frozen desert with mean annual temperatures far below freezing. Sediment cores drilled from beneath ice sheets show evidence of ancient rivers, deltas, and lake beds. These features indicate that precipitation was sufficient to maintain flowing water throughout the year. Fossils found in these sediments, including leaves, wood, and pollen, illustrate that forests extended across much of the continent, even in regions now deeply buried under ice. The combination of warm temperatures, consistent water supply, and long daylight in summer created ideal conditions for forests to establish and persist for millions of years. Studies of fossil leaves show adaptations to polar light cycles. Many plants developed broad leaves to capture maximum sunlight during the long summer days. Growth rings in fossilized wood indicate periods of rapid summer growth, followed by slower winter growth. Such adaptations are similar to modern high-latitude forests in the Northern Hemisphere, where trees must endure long winters, yet take full advantage of short, intense growing seasons. These seasonal patterns allowed forests to maintain productivity and biodiversity, despite extreme variations in light throughout the year. Fossil pollen provides insight into plant diversity and ecological interactions. Palynologists, scientists who study pollen, have identified multiple species of trees, ferns, and flowering plants in Antarctica's sediments. These plants were not confined to a narrow region, but were distributed across lowlands, valleys, and coastal plains. The presence of diverse pollen types suggests that forests were mixed and complex, forming ecosystems with multiple layers and niches. Insects and small animals likely interacted with these forests, forming interconnected ecological webs. Global comparisons reinforce the significance of Antarctica's warm periods. During the Cretaceous and early Eocene, other polar regions also supported forests. Fossils from the Arctic show similar patterns of temperate vegetation, highlighting that elevated greenhouse gases and warm ocean currents created globally favorable conditions for high-latitude forests. Antarctica's position near the pole meant that seasonal light cycles were extreme, but the warm climate allowed these forests to flourish where they could not survive today. The transition from warm periods to cooler climates was gradual. Geological records showed that temperatures fluctuated over millions of years, with intervals of warmth followed by cooling events. These fluctuations influence forest composition, species distribution, and productivity. Fossil evidence indicates that some forests persisted even as temperatures declined, demonstrating resilience and adaptation. The timing of these changes also provides clues about the eventual decline of forests as Antarctica moved toward permanent glaciation. Examining sediments and fossils together allows scientists to reconstruct the continent's paleoclimate in detail. Layers of coal, river deposits, lake beds, and fossil forests form a chronological record, showing intervals of warmth and forest expansion. Chemical and isotopic signatures reveal temperature and precipitation, while pollen and leaf fossils illustrate plant adaptations to light and seasonal cycles. This combination of evidence provides a comprehensive view of Antarctica as a green and productive continent for much of its past, despite its modern icy appearance. In summary, Antarctica's warm periods created conditions that supported forests for millions of years. Elevated greenhouse gases, ocean currents, moderate precipitation, and seasonal light cycles combined to form an environment where trees, ferns, and flowering plants could thrive. Fossil evidence from sediments, soils, and coal beds confirms the presence of extensive forests across valleys, coastal plains, and river systems. The study of paleoclimate not only explains how these forests existed, but also provides a foundation for understanding the continent's gradual transition to the ice-covered land we see today. By analyzing climate, isotopes, and fossil plants, scientists reveal a vivid picture of Antarctica's warm past, a time when the southernmost continent was alive with forests, rivers, and thriving ecosystems. The forests of ancient Antarctica are known to us primarily through the evidence left behind in stone and sediment. Fossilized trees, leaves, wood, and spores provide the clearest glimpse of what once covered the continent. In many areas, paleobotanists have found trunks preserved in place, sometimes still rooted in the soil, indicating forests that once grew along river valleys or coastal plains. The trunks range in size, from thin saplings to massive conifers several meters across, suggesting a variety of tree ages and a dense canopy above the forest floor. Fallen branches and leaf litter are also preserved, often compressed between layers of sandstone or mudstone. These fossils reveal not only the presence of forests, but also their structure, showing multiple layers of vegetation similar to modern temperate forests. Leaves preserved in fine-grained sediments offer remarkable detail. The shapes of the leaves, their veins, and even cell patterns in some cases allow scientists to identify the species and understand their growth habits. Broadleaves suggest species that captured maximum sunlight during long summer days, while smaller, narrow leaves were adapted to conserve water during seasonal dry periods. Tree ferns left behind tall, slender trunks topped with fronds, forming the understory and mid-canopy layers of forests. Gymnosperms, including conifers, dominated the higher canopy, their thick wood providing stability and shelter for other plants. Early flowering plants, or angiosperms, appeared more sporadically, adding diversity and indicating that the Antarctic forests were evolving alongside forests on other continents. Spore fossils are abundant and informative. Ferns and other spore-producing plants release millions of spores each season, many of which became trapped in sediment and were preserved for millions of years. By studying these spores under microscopes, scientists can identify species, estimate their abundance, and reconstruct the distribution of ferns across valleys, wetlands, and river plains. Spore evidence also helps determine seasonal patterns, since ferns often release spores in response to light, temperature, or rainfall cycles. Together with leaf and wood fossils, spores provide a comprehensive picture of the forest's composition. Soil layers and peat deposits offer another window into these ancient forests. In certain regions, paleosols reveal layers of decayed plant material, root traces, and mineral content that indicate forest floors. Peat, which forms in wetlands and bogs, accumulated over long periods from decaying leaves, stems, and wood. These peat layers eventually compressed into coal deposits, but the original structure preserves evidence of forest ecosystems, including fallen branches, plant litter, and small roots. The presence of peat suggests that wetlands and swampy areas were common within the forests, creating habitats for smaller plants, mosses, and ferns. Soil chemistry, analyzed through isotopes and mineral content, confirms that these forests had fertile soils maintained by the breakdown of plant material and the slow accumulation of organic matter. Paleobotanists reconstruct these ancient forests through careful study of fossils, sediments, and soils. By identifying plant types, their growth patterns, and their environmental needs, scientists can visualize the arrangement of species in the landscape. Fossilized stumps indicate the spacing of trees and their approximate height, while leaf litter and fallen branches show the density of the understory. By combining this evidence with knowledge of modern forests, researchers can imagine forests with tall conifers forming a canopy, tree ferns filling the mid-layer, and smaller flowering plants scattered along the forest floor. Fossil pollen and spores further refine this reconstruction, showing which species were dominant and how biodiversity varied across regions. Comparisons with modern forests provide context for visualizing Antarctic forests. Today, temperate forests in New Zealand, southern Chile, and Tasmania exhibit layered vegetation, with tall trees, ferns, and flowering plants forming complex ecosystems. Ancient Antarctic forests likely resembled these, with the added challenge of polar light cycles. During summer, continuous sunlight allowed rapid growth, while winter darkness slowed metabolic activity, creating seasonal rhythms in growth rings, leaf production, and reproduction. These adaptations can be seen in the fossil record, where growth rings in wood reveal periods of fast summer growth and slower winter growth, similar to patterns in modern high-latitude forests. Fossilized roots provide additional insight into the structure of forests. In some cases, stumps remain in their original positions, with roots extending into ancient soils. These roots stabilize the trees, absorbed nutrients, and contributed to soil formation by breaking down rock and organic material. The depth and spread of roots indicate the types of soil and water availability, showing that forests thrived in areas with adequate drainage and moisture. In wetlands and floodplains, roots formed networks that supported dense stands of trees, while on slopes and ridges, shallower roots adapted to thinner soils. The diversity of species is evident in the fossil record. Gymnosperms dominated, providing the main canopy and producing seeds that could survive seasonal variations. Tree ferns and smaller ferns filled the understory, reproducing through spores that spread across valleys and wetlands. Angiosperms, though less abundant, introduced a layer of flowering diversity, indicating that Antarctica's forests were evolving in step with forests on other continents. Together, these species formed a mosaic of habitats, supporting a complex ecosystem that included not only plants, but also the animals that fed on them and lived among them. Fossilized leaves reveal seasonal adaptations. Many leaves have thick cuticles, an outer layer that reduces water loss during dry or cold periods. Others have specialized shapes to capture sunlight efficiently or to shed snow during winter months. Leaf fossils often show damage from insects or microbial activity, evidence that the forest was alive with interactions between species. Even in polar conditions, these forests were dynamic, responding to environmental changes, seasonal cycles, and long-term climate fluctuations. Coal beds, formed from ancient peat, provide a long-term record of forest presence. Thick coal seams indicate repeated accumulation of plant matter, showing that forests persisted over extended periods. The composition of these coal beds, including leaves, stems, and wood fragments, allows scientists to estimate the types of forests and their density. Coal layers interspersed with sediments from rivers or lakes demonstrate that forests grew alongside waterways, contributing to diverse ecosystems with standing and fallen vegetation. Pollen grains preserved in sediments are particularly valuable. By analyzing pollen, scientists can determine the relative abundance of different plant species, the timing of reproductive cycles, and the seasonal patterns of growth. Fossil pollen confirms that forests were mixed, with conifers dominating certain areas and ferns and flowering plants more abundant in others. This diversity suggests that forests were resilient, able to withstand environmental changes and maintain ecological balance over millions of years. The structure of these forests varied depending on location. In river valleys, trees grew taller, forming dense canopies that shaded the understory. Near lakes and wetlands, ferns and flowering plants flourished in moist soils, creating lush, open spaces. On slopes or ridges, trees were more spaced, allowing sunlight to reach the ground and supporting smaller shrubs and ferns. This variety of habitats contributed to biodiversity and created a complex landscape where species interacted and adapted to microenvironments. Fossilized wood sometimes preserves cell structures that reveal growth patterns. Annual rings, formed by seasonal growth, indicate the speed and rhythm of tree development. Wide rings suggest rapid growth during long summer days, while narrow rings reflect slower growth during winter darkness. These growth patterns align with the high-latitude light cycles, confirming that forests adapted to months of light and months of dark. Such evidence demonstrates not only that forests existed, but also how they functioned within their environmental context. By studying the combination of wood, leaves, roots, spores, pollen, and soils, paleobotanists reconstruct a vivid picture of Antarctica's forests. These forests were temperate, layered, and diverse, with multiple species occupying specific ecological niches. The arrangement of trees, ferns, and flowering plants created a living landscape that persisted for millions of years. Fossil evidence shows that forests were dynamic, responding to seasonal changes, water availability, and long-term climate shifts. Yet they remained resilient until the onset of cooler conditions that eventually led to ice formation. Ancient Antarctic forests were more than collections of plants. They formed ecosystems with structure and function, where trees provided shelter, soils supported growth, and rivers and lakes nourished the land. Even today, the fossil record allows us to imagine these forests in 3 dimensions, with canopies stretching overhead, ferns covering the ground, and flowering plants adding color and variety. The combination of fossilized evidence and modern comparisons helps scientists reconstruct the living world that existed millions of years before ice covered the continent. These forests, preserved in coal, sediment, and stone, are silent witnesses to Antarctica's hidden past. Each fossil tells a story of life, growth, and adaptation in a world very different from the frozen continent of today. By examining them, scientists uncover the composition, structure, and seasonal rhythms of forests that once thrived near the South Pole. The evidence forms the foundation for understanding the continent's ecological history, preparing the way to study the animals, rivers, and broader ecosystems that these forests supported in the next chapters of Antarctica's story. Alongside the forests of ancient Antarctica, life moved, crawled, and swam, forming ecosystems that were far more active than the icy continent we know today. Fossil evidence reveals that insects were among the earliest and most abundant inhabitants of these forests. Beetles, cockroaches, and other small invertebrates left traces in amber or fine sediment layers, their bodies preserved with remarkable detail. These insects played a vital role in the forests, feeding on leaves, decaying wood, and other plant material. They helped recycle nutrients, breaking down organic matter and returning it to the soil. Spore-feeding insects, for instance, ensured that ferns and mosses maintained a balanced cycle of growth and decay. Reptiles also inhabited Antarctica during its warmer periods. Fossils of lizards, early turtles, and crocodile-like species suggest that these animals thrived in temperate conditions. Unlike today's polar reptiles, which cannot survive in cold environments, these ancient species were adapted to months of light and darkness, moderating their activity to seasonal changes. Fossilized bones and teeth provide evidence of their diets, showing that some fed on insects, small plants, or fish from rivers and lakes. Coastal and wetland areas supported populations of amphibians as well, small creatures dependent on freshwater habitats, which indicate the presence of ponds and streams within the forested regions. Early mammals, though small and less conspicuous in the fossil record, were present alongside these forests. Most were tiny, nocturnal, and insectivorous, feeding on the abundant insects within the forests. Fossilized jawbones and teeth reveal their diet, showing that they adapted to limited food sources during periods of winter darkness. These mammals were often burrowers, living in soil or leaf litter to maintain warmth and shelter. Their presence, though subtle, adds to the picture of a functioning forest ecosystem where multiple layers of life interacted in complex ways. Marine life along the coasts of Antarctica also flourished. Fossilized shells, crustaceans, and fish remains indicate that shallow seas supported rich ecosystems. These waters provided food for reptiles, birds, and early marine mammals. Coastal forests grew close to the shore, where rivers emptied nutrients into the sea, creating productive habitats for shellfish and fish. Fossils of mollusks and bony fish suggest a mix of species adapted to varying salinity, temperature, and light conditions. This coastal interface linked terrestrial and marine life, creating corridors of interaction between forests and the ocean. Insects and small vertebrates were not the only animals interacting with these forests. Evidence suggests that giant insects, such as dragonfly-like species with wingspans exceeding 30 centimeters, patrolled the skies above the trees. These predators fed on smaller insects and played a role in controlling populations within the forest ecosystem. Fossilized wing patterns and venation preserved in fine sediment provide clues about their flight patterns, predatory habits, and ecological role. The diversity of insects indicates that even in polar regions, food webs were complex, with multiple levels of interaction. The structure of food chains in these forests relied heavily on plants as the primary producers. Trees, ferns, and flowering plants captured sunlight and produced organic matter, which supported herbivores like insects, some small reptiles, and early mammals. These herbivores, in turn, became prey for carnivorous insects, reptiles, and other small predators. Nutrient cycling depended on the decomposition of plant matter and animal waste, which enriched soils and maintained the growth of forests. Evidence from fossilized gut contents and coprolites, or fossilized feces, provides insight into these diets, revealing the intricate balance of life within these ecosystems. Adaptations to polar light cycles were evident in both plants and animals. Many animals likely timed their reproductive cycles to the long summer days, producing offspring when food was abundant. During the dark winter months, insects, reptiles, and mammals may have entered periods of dormancy or reduced activity. Fossil evidence of growth rings in bones and shells shows seasonal variation, confirming that these animals responded to light and temperature changes. Even small mammals exhibited features for conserving energy and surviving extended periods of limited food availability. Amphibians and reptiles near rivers and lakes indicate that water temperatures were moderate enough to support ectothermic or cold-blooded life. Sediment deposits show the existence of wetlands, floodplains, and slow-moving rivers, providing habitats for frogs, salamander-like species, and small crocodile relatives. Their presence illustrates that freshwater ecosystems were integral to the forests, supplying food, shelter, and breeding grounds. These aquatic habitats were connected to terrestrial ecosystems, with animals moving between water and land to meet their needs. Birds also likely inhabited Antarctica's forests, although the fossil record is limited. Early avian species may have nested in trees or near water, feeding on insects, small reptiles, and seeds. Fossilized feathers, eggshell fragments, and bones suggest that birds participated in these ecosystems, contributing to seed dispersal and the control of insect populations. Coastal areas may have been especially important for bird life, providing access to marine food sources while forests offered shelter from predators and weather extremes. The marine environment supported larger predators as well. Fossil evidence indicates the presence of fish-eating reptiles and early marine mammals along the coast. These animals relied on rivers and estuaries to hunt, feeding on abundant fish and invertebrates. Nutrients from terrestrial ecosystems, including decaying plant matter and organic debris from forests, flowed into the sea, enriching coastal waters and supporting a diverse marine community. This interaction highlights the connection between land and sea, showing that Antarctic forests were not isolated, but part of a larger ecological network. The diversity of insect life is particularly striking. Fossilized wings, exoskeletons, and mouthparts reveal specialized adaptations for feeding, pollination, and predation. Pollinating insects likely interacted with early flowering plants, facilitating reproduction and contributing to plant diversity. Leaf-mining insects left distinctive marks on fossil leaves, showing that they fed within plant tissues. These interactions suggest a level of ecological complexity similar to modern temperate forests, with specialized roles for different species. Reptiles in these forests range from small lizards to larger crocodile-like species. Fossilized bones indicate adaptations for forest life, including climbing, burrowing, and swimming. Some species likely hunted insects, small vertebrates, or even eggs of other animals, maintaining population balance within the ecosystem. Limb structures, skull shapes, and teeth preserved in fossils provide clues about their diet, locomotion, and behavior. These adaptations demonstrate that even in polar conditions, reptiles could thrive with sufficient warmth, food, and shelter. Early mammals, though small, filled critical niches in the food web. Fossil teeth and jaw fragments indicate insectivorous diets, while burrowing habits provided protection from predators and extreme weather. Some mammals may have stored food or entered torpor during periods of winter darkness, allowing them to survive when resources were limited. Their interactions with plants and insects were subtle but essential, contributing to nutrient cycling and ecosystem stability. Coastal ecosystems, rivers, and lakes provided corridors for animal movement. Fossilized footprints, burrows, and sediment disturbances show that animals traveled between forests and water sources to find food, mate, or escape predators. These connections created a mosaic of habitats, with animals adapting to both terrestrial and aquatic conditions. Such movement ensured the exchange of energy and nutrients across the landscape, supporting complex food webs. The interactions between plants and animals in ancient Antarctic forests demonstrate the importance of biodiversity. Trees provided canopy cover, stabilizing soils and creating microhabitats for ferns, mosses, and small animals. Insects and herbivores fed on plants, while predators controlled their populations. Aquatic habitats connected forests to rivers and seas, allowing species to move, reproduce, and interact. This network of relationships created a resilient ecosystem capable of surviving climate fluctuations for millions of years. Fossilized remains indicate that polar forests had multiple layers of life, with species occupying specific niches. Herbivores consumed leaves, stems, and seeds. Predators hunted insects, reptiles, or small mammals. Decomposers recycled organic matter into fertile soils. Coastal and marine animals integrated with terrestrial life, feeding on fish, mollusks, and detritus. This ecological complexity, preserved in fossils, shows that Antarctica was once a vibrant continent with diverse life forms coexisting in temperate conditions near the South Pole. In summary, the animal life of ancient Antarctica was diverse, adapted to polar forests, and closely connected with the plants and freshwater and coastal habitats. Insects, reptiles, early mammals, birds, and marine species all played roles in complex ecosystems. Seasonal cycles, nutrient flows, and interactions between species created balanced food webs. The fossil record provides a detailed view of how these forests functioned as living ecosystems, demonstrating that Antarctica's forests were not only lush, but teeming with life, a world far removed from the ice-covered land we see today. The forests and life of ancient Antarctica are preserved not only in fossils, but also in the rocks and sediments that formed beneath them. Layers of coal, sandstone, mudstone, and other deposits hold the story of past climates, water systems, and forested landscapes. Coal beds, in particular, serve as strong evidence for the presence of dense forests. Coal forms when plant material accumulates in wetlands, swamps, or floodplains, and is buried under layers of sediment for millions of years. Over time, heat and pressure transform this organic matter into coal. Thick seams of coal found in East and West Antarctica reveal that forests once covered large areas, producing vast quantities of plant debris that slowly became compressed beneath layers of sand and clay. Sandstones and mudstones complement the story told by coal. Sandstone often forms in river channels, indicating ancient streams and rivers that flowed through forests. Ripple marks, crossbedding, and grain patterns preserved in sandstone show the direction and speed of water, helping scientists reconstruct the location and size of ancient rivers. Mudstones, deposited in slower-moving waters like lakes or wetlands, capture fine details of plant and animal life. Fossil leaves, spores, and insects are often preserved within these mudstones, providing snapshots of forests and the creatures that lived there. Together, these sediment types reveal a landscape shaped by water, soil, and vegetation. The arrangement of sediment layers also shows how ancient environments changed over time. In some areas, thick sequences of coal, sandstone, and mudstone alternate, indicating cycles of forest growth, river shifts, and wetland expansion. These layers act as natural calendars, recording periods of forest flourishing and decline. Geologists study these sequences to understand the timing of environmental events, including wet and dry periods, flooding, and sediment deposition. By examining the thickness, composition, and organization of layers, scientists can infer how rivers meandered, where lakes expanded, and how soils formed to support plant life. Dating these sediment layers is crucial for placing Antarctica's forests in a timeline. Scientists use a variety of methods, including radiometric dating of volcanic ash layers found within sediments. These ash layers contain minerals such as zircon, which capture radioactive isotopes that decay at a known rate. By measuring these isotopes, researchers can determine the age of the layers with precision. In addition, paleomagnetic studies measure the orientation of magnetic minerals in rocks, revealing the position of the continent at the time of deposition. Combining radiometric dating with fossil evidence allows for a detailed reconstruction of when forests grew, how long they persisted, and when environmental changes occurred. Sediments also record shifts between glacial and non-glacial periods. Certain layers contain evidence of cold conditions, including glacial till, striated rocks, and erratic boulders transported by ice. Other layers, rich in plant material, coal, and freshwater sediments, indicate warmer periods when ice was absent or limited. By analyzing these transitions, scientists can understand how Antarctica moved from a temperate, forested continent to a frozen land dominated by ice sheets. The alternation of sediment types forms a timeline of climate change, showing the rise and fall of forests in relation to temperature fluctuations. Soil horizons preserved in sediment layers reveal the presence of forest floors. Paleosols contain root traces, leaf litter, and mineral signatures that indicate nutrient cycling. These soils were fertile, enriched by decaying plant material, and supported the dense vegetation of forests. Chemical analysis of paleosols, including the ratios of carbon and nitrogen isotopes, allows scientists to infer the types of plants that grew and the productivity of these ecosystems. Soil layers also reveal wet and dry cycles, showing that forests adapted to varying moisture conditions over time. Coal beds are not uniform, but vary in thickness, composition, and plant content. Some seams contain mostly woody material, suggesting dense conifer forests, while others include leaves and ferns, indicating a more mixed forest. Fossilized roots within coal beds demonstrate that trees were anchored in place and formed stable ecosystems. The presence of these deep, organic-rich deposits confirms that forests were not occasional or sparse, but widespread, covering valleys, floodplains, and coastal lowlands. Sedimentary evidence also shows ancient rivers and lakes that shaped the forests. Sandstone channels and gravel deposits reveal river flow directions and energy levels, while mudstone layers mark calm lakes or ponds. Fossilized aquatic plants and small animals preserved in these sediments show that water bodies were productive and connected to terrestrial ecosystems. Streams carried nutrients into lakes, wetlands, and rivers, supporting plant growth and creating habitats for insects, reptiles, and small mammals. These hydrological networks were essential for the survival of forests, providing water and shaping soil distribution. Crossbedding in sandstones records the movement of water and sediment through rivers. This layering shows how rivers shifted over time, creating new habitats and burying plant material in different areas. Flooding events, recorded as layers of coarse sand and gravel, sometimes preserved fallen trees and debris, capturing moments in the life of the forest. Mudstone layers in floodplains and lake beds often contain well-preserved leaves, stems, and spores, providing snapshots of vegetation at specific points in time. The chemical composition of sediments reveals past climates and forest conditions. Ratios of isotopes in carbon and oxygen indicate temperature, rainfall, and plant types. Sediments rich in organic carbon correlate with periods of forest growth, while layers with higher mineral content suggest erosion or reduced vegetation cover. These chemical markers allow scientists to link rock types directly to forest presence and environmental conditions, providing evidence that forests existed across large areas of Antarctica for millions of years. Paleobotanical studies often combine sediment analysis with fossil evidence. Fossilized leaves, wood, and spores found within sandstone, mudstone, and coal layers allow scientists to identify species, estimate forest density, and reconstruct forest composition. By mapping the distribution of these sediments, researchers can determine where rivers flowed, where wetlands and swamps existed, and where forests were most dense. This integration of geology and biology provides a comprehensive picture of Antarctica's forested past. Volcanic ash layers within sediment sequences provide precise time markers and additional evidence for environmental conditions. Ash settles quickly over large areas during eruptions, creating a thin layer that is preserved in sedimentary sequences. Fossils found above or below these ash layers can be dated, giving a reliable estimate of forest age. Chemical analysis of ash also reveals the influence of volcanic activity on soils, showing how mineral-rich deposits may have enhanced plant growth and contributed to forest productivity. Fossilized roots and stumps embedded in sediment show that trees grew in place rather than being transported by water. These in situ fossils indicate stable forest environments where trees remained rooted for decades or centuries. Layers of sediment above these roots captured leaves, fallen branches, and spores, preserving a record of the forest floor. Such deposits reveal the structure of ancient forests, including canopy density, understory composition, and soil depth. In some regions, multiple sediment layers capture repeated cycles of forest growth and burial. Alternating layers of coal, sandstone, and mudstone suggest periods of lush vegetation, followed by sedimentation from floods, river shifts, or lakes. These sequences provide insight into the dynamic nature of ancient landscapes, showing that forests were resilient but subject to natural disturbances. By studying these patterns, scientists understand how forests adapted to changing environments and maintained ecological balance over long periods. Fossilized plant debris within sediments confirms the types of trees and ferns that dominated the forests. Large conifers contributed woody material to coal beds, while ferns and flowering plants added leaves, stems, and spores. Sediment layers often preserve fine details, such as leaf shape, vein patterns, and spore morphology, allowing scientists to identify species and compare them to modern relatives. These comparisons help visualize the forests as layered ecosystems, with a canopy of conifers, a mid-layer of ferns, and smaller plants covering the forest floor. By linking sediment types to forest presence, researchers can map ancient ecosystems. Areas with thick coal seams and mudstones indicate dense forests and wetlands, while sandstone channels mark rivers that shaped forested landscapes. Sedimentary evidence shows how forests were connected to water systems, how soil and nutrient cycles supported plant growth, and how ecological interactions persisted over millions of years. The rocks themselves become a record of life, climate, and landscape, preserving the memory of forests long gone beneath the ice. In conclusion, sediments and rocks provide a detailed and tangible record of ancient forests in Antarctica. Coal beds indicate widespread plant growth, sandstones reveal river systems, mudstones capture lakes and wetlands, and soil layers preserve forest floors. Radiometric dating, isotopic analysis, and sediment mapping allow scientists to reconstruct the timing, structure, and extent of forests. These geological clues, combined with fossil evidence, show that Antarctica once supported complex, thriving forests, demonstrating the close link between rock, sediment, and life in the deep history of the continent. The story of Antarctica's forests is inseparable from the scientists who uncovered their secrets. For much of human history, the continent remained a mystery, cloaked in ice and largely inaccessible. Early explorers imagined Antarctica as a barren, lifeless land, frozen and distant. It was not until the late 19th and early 20th centuries that scientific expeditions began to reveal a deeper history beneath the ice. Teams of geologists, botanists, and paleontologists ventured into harsh, remote regions, armed with rock hammers, notebooks, and determination. These expeditions laid the foundation for understanding the continent's forested past. One of the earliest discoveries that hinted at Antarctica's lush history came from fossilized leaves and plant fragments embedded in sedimentary rocks. Early explorers found these fossils in exposed cliffs and along coastal regions where erosion had revealed the layers beneath. Fossilized tree trunks were occasionally discovered, preserved in situ, showing that forests had once grown across areas now covered by ice. These initial finds, though limited in number, inspired further exploration and research, leading to more systematic efforts to uncover the continent's past. Landmark discovery was the identification of a Glossopteris, a genus of seed ferns that dominated Antarctica during the Permian period, roughly 250 million years ago. Glossopteris leaves, with their distinctive tongue-shaped form, were found across multiple southern continents, including South America, Africa, Australia, and Antarctica. Their presence on distant landmasses provided crucial evidence for the theory of continental drift, showing that these continents were once joined in the supercontinent Gondwana. In Antarctica, Glossopteris fossils were found in coal-bearing sediments, linking the plant directly to ancient forests and wetlands. These discoveries not only revealed the flora, but also reshaped our understanding of Earth's geological history. Coal beds themselves became a focus of early scientific exploration. Thick seams of coal, sometimes tens of meters deep, were observed along mountain ranges and exposed cliffs. These coal deposits were rich in plant fossils, including wood, leaves, and spores. Early geologists documented the size, composition, and orientation of these beds, recognizing them as the remains of vast ancient forests. Coal mines, while more common in other continents, offered a model for understanding the formation of coal in Antarctica and highlighted the continent's potential as a record of prehistoric ecosystems. Paleobotany emerged as a crucial discipline for studying these fossils. Scientists specializing in plant life examined fossilized leaves, stems, roots, and pollen to identify species, reconstruct forest composition, and understand ecological relationships. Microscopes revealed cellular structures in fossil wood and leaves, allowing researchers to determine growth patterns, seasonal adaptations, and even the climate conditions in which the plants lived. Spore analysis helped map the distribution of ferns and other spore-producing plants, revealing a complex mosaic of forested habitats. Paleobotany, combined with geology, provided a full picture of how ancient forests existed and evolved over millions of years. Modern technology has greatly enhanced the study of Antarctica's fossils. Ground-penetrating radar allows scientists to detect fossil-rich layers beneath ice and sediment without extensive digging. Remote sensing and satellite imagery help identify exposed cliffs and ridges likely to contain fossils. Computer modeling integrates data from sediment layers, fossil finds, and isotopic studies, producing detailed reconstructions of ancient ecosystems. Even drones have been deployed to survey inaccessible regions, capturing high-resolution images that guide excavation teams. Technology now enables the study of fossils in their geological context, ensuring that information about age, environment, and ecosystem is preserved. International collaboration has been vital for Antarctic research. Teams from countries including the United States, Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, Argentina, and China regularly work together in joint expeditions. The harsh environment, logistical challenges, and cost of Antarctic research make cooperation essential. Scientists share equipment, transportation, and data, combining expertise from geology, paleobotany, climatology, and biology. International treaties governing Antarctic research ensure that discoveries are documented and shared, advancing collective knowledge about the continent's ancient forests. Key excavation sites have yielded remarkable fossil finds. In the Transantarctic Mountains, coal seams interspersed with sandstone and mudstone revealed forests preserved in exceptional detail. Trunks, leaves, and spores were carefully extracted, catalogued, and analyzed. On the Antarctic Peninsula, coastal cliffs expose layers rich in Glossopteris and other Permian flora. Field teams braved extreme cold, high winds, and crevasse-ridden terrain to uncover these fossils, often camping for weeks in temporary stations. Each fossil excavation told a story of patience, observation, and the slow uncovering of Antarctica's hidden past. Stories of discovery often illustrate the dedication required to study Antarctica. One notable expedition involved researchers hiking across snow-covered ridges with hand tools to extract a single fossil trunk. The trunk, preserved in mudstone, measured several meters in length and retained evidence of annual growth rings. Analysis of these rings revealed not only the tree's age, but also seasonal climate patterns. Another team discovered a sediment layer containing thousands of fern spores, capturing an entire forest floor in microscopic detail. Such finds, painstakingly documented, added depth to our understanding of polar forests. In some cases, fossils were found in extraordinary preservation. Leaves pressed flat between sediment layers retained vein patterns, cellular structures, and even evidence of insect feeding. Roots embedded in paleosols preserved the layout of forest floors, showing how trees were spaced and how understory plants filled the gaps. Coal seams preserved entire wetland ecosystems, including fallen logs, leaf litter, and spore-rich layers. Each discovery added a piece to the puzzle, allowing scientists to reconstruct the size, composition, and dynamics of forests that thrived millions of years before the Ice Age. Historical records show that early explorers were often amazed by the richness of plant fossils. Expeditions led by geologists such as Thomas Griffith Taylor and Douglas Mawson in the early 20th century documented these finds, noting the presence of coal, fossil wood, and leaves in remote locations. These scientists were sometimes limited by technology, harsh weather, and isolation. Yet their careful observations laid the groundwork for modern paleobotanical studies. Their field notes, sketches, and photographs remain valuable records, preserving information that continues to guide contemporary research. Fossil discoveries also reinforce the connection between Antarctica and other southern continents. The distribution of Glossopteris and other Permian plants showed that these regions were once linked, providing support for the theory of plate tectonics. Coal seams in Antarctica correspond closely with similar deposits in South America, Africa, and Australia, demonstrating that forests were widespread across Gondwana. Fossil comparisons allowed scientists to track plant evolution, migration patterns, and the adaptation of species to polar light and climate conditions. The meticulous process of extracting fossils requires care to preserve both the specimen and its context. Paleobotanists map each layer of sediment, photograph the site, and record measurements before removing fossils. Fragile leaves and spores are stabilized with resin or protective coatings for transport. Larger fossils, such as tree trunks or coal blocks, are documented in detail and often studied in laboratories far from the field site. This process ensures that data about the fossil's position, orientation, and surrounding environment are preserved, allowing accurate reconstructions of ancient forests. International collaboration continues in modern times, with expeditions coordinated through research stations such as McMurdo in the Ross Sea region, Casey in East Antarctica, and Rothra on the Antarctic Peninsula. Teams combine expertise in geology, paleobotany, climatology, and remote sensing. Fieldwork often includes drilling cores to extract sediment sequences, surveying exposed cliffs for fossil layers, and cataloging specimens for laboratory analysis. Shared databases and digital repositories allow scientists worldwide to study Antarctic fossils, compare findings, and build comprehensive models of ancient ecosystems. Fossil discoveries have extended beyond plants to include traces of insects, small reptiles, and early mammals, complementing the story of forests. Insects preserved in sediment and amber provide evidence of pollination, herbivory, and predation. Reptile bones show adaptation to temperate climates, while early mammals reveal nocturnal and burrowing behaviors. Together, these fossils provide a full picture of how Antarctic forests functioned as ecosystems, with interactions between species and seasonal responses to polar light cycles. Through decades of exploration, Antarctica's fossil record has become a window into Earth's distant past. The combined work of historical expeditions and modern technology has revealed forests, rivers, wetlands, and thriving life in a land now dominated by ice. Each fossil, sediment layer, and coal seam adds to a growing understanding of how forests existed, evolved, and eventually gave way to cooler climates. The collaborative efforts of scientists across the world continue to uncover new evidence, refining our understanding of the continent's ecological and geological history. In conclusion, fossil discoveries and scientific expeditions have illuminated the hidden world of Antarctica's ancient forests. From the earliest leaves and Glossopteris fossils to coal seams, sediment layers, and preserved forest floors, researchers have reconstructed a continent alive with plant life and complex ecosystems. Paleobotany, geology, and modern technology work together to reveal details about forest structure, species diversity, and climate conditions. International collaboration ensures that knowledge is shared and expanded, while fieldwork at key excavation sites continues to uncover the stories preserved in stone. These efforts reveal that Antarctica was once a green, thriving continent, providing insight into the interplay of life, climate, and geological change over millions of years. For millions of years, Antarctica remained warm enough to support lush forests, but the climate began to shift gradually. Cooling trends emerged over the late Eocene and into the Oligocene, a period roughly 34 million years ago. Temperatures fell slowly, yet steadily, altering rainfall patterns, ocean currents, and the productivity of ecosystems. Fossil evidence shows that plant diversity began to decline, with fewer Glossopteris and fern, remains appearing in sediment layers. Coal seams became thinner, and leaves in mudstones were smaller and more sparse, reflecting less dense forests. Pollen records corroborate this change, showing a gradual decrease in plant abundance and variety. One major factor in the cooling was the repositioning of continents. As Antarctica separated from South America and Australia, the surrounding ocean currents changed. The isolation of the continent allowed a continuous circumpolar current to form, circulating cold waters around Antarctica and reducing the transport of warm water from lower latitudes. This oceanic shift cooled the continent steadily, making it harder for forests to survive. At the same time, changes in atmospheric carbon dioxide levels contributed to global cooling. CO2 concentrations declined, reducing the greenhouse effect and limiting the heat available to sustain temperate forests. As forests dwindled, ecosystems adjusted. Tree cover became patchy, with conifers surviving in sheltered valleys, while ferns and smaller plants persisted near streams and wetlands. Insects and small animals faced shrinking habitats, and some species disappeared from the fossil record entirely. Freshwater ecosystems became less productive, and sediment layers reflect reduced plant and animal remains. The interplay of reduced light during long winter months and falling temperatures stressed forests, resulting in slower growth, narrower growth rings in fossil wood, and ultimately the collapse of dense forest canopies in many regions. Sediment and fossil evidence capture these transitions. Pollen grains from fossil cores show a clear decline in diversity and density, indicating a reduction in plant populations. Leaves preserved in mudstone layers become more fragmented and sparse. Coal deposits that once reflected thick peat layers grow thinner, signaling smaller or less productive wetlands. Fossils of invertebrates and small vertebrates also diminish, demonstrating the cascading effect of cooling on ecosystems. By studying these records, scientists can see how the once vibrant forests gradually gave way to tundra-like environments. The gradual formation of ice sheets marks the final phase of this transformation. As temperatures dropped, snow accumulation exceeded summer melt in some regions, and ice began to persist year-round. Early glaciers formed along highlands and coastal areas, slowly expanding over millions of years. Ice cores show the composition of ancient ice, while sediment deposits record the gradual advance of glaciers over former forested valleys. Forest floors were buried under sediment and ice, preserving fossils but ending active growth. Rivers were redirected or blocked by advancing ice. Lakes froze seasonally or permanently, and ecosystems that once thrived in temperate conditions were replaced by cold, barren landscapes. By the end of this cooling period, Antarctica had become a continent dominated by ice. Forests that had persisted for tens of millions of years disappeared from most regions. Only scattered plant remnants and fossil deposits preserved the memory of these ecosystems. The transition from a green, temperate world to an ice-covered continent was neither sudden nor uniform. It occurred over millions of years, with pockets of forest surviving in sheltered areas until they too succumbed to the changing climate. The fossil record, sediment layers, and ice cores together tell this story, showing a continent transformed by climate, ocean currents, and continental drift. The evidence demonstrates that Antarctica's ice sheets are the result of long-term processes, not sudden events. Gradual cooling, the establishment of circumpolar currents, and declining greenhouse gases all contributed to conditions that no longer supported forests. Plant and animal life adapted as long as possible, but the ecosystems eventually collapsed. By studying pollen records, fossilized wood, coal beds, and sedimentary sequences, scientists can trace the slow retreat of forests and the emergence of the Ice Age. This transformation laid the foundation for the frozen Antarctica we see today, a land of ice that once sheltered rich, thriving forests and diverse ecosystems. Antarctica's ancient forests were not isolated from the rest of the world. They were part of a larger network of ecosystems that covered the southern continents during the time of Gondwana. Fossils from Antarctica, Australia, South America, Africa, and India show striking similarities in plant species, such as Glossopteris, ferns, and early conifers. These shared species indicate that the southern continents once formed a connected landmass, allowing plants and animals to spread across vast distances. Forests in Antarctica contributed to a global pattern of temperate ecosystems that existed near the South Pole, supporting life adapted to long seasonal cycles. The connections between continents were more than geographic. Rivers, coastal systems, and shallow seas provided corridors for dispersal of plant spores, seeds, and small animals. Fossil spores found in Antarctic sediments closely match those from Australia and South America, showing that winds and water currents could carry reproductive material across continents. These exchanges maintained genetic diversity and allowed forests to recover from localized disturbances, such as flooding or volcanic activity. Antarctica, in this sense, was not a remote outpost, but a keystone in the spread and persistence of southern forest ecosystems. Forests in Antarctica also played a significant role in global carbon cycles. Large-scale vegetation captured carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, storing it in biomass and soil. When plant material decayed, it contributed to coal formation and enriched sediment layers, sequestering carbon over millions of years. This process helped regulate global temperatures by reducing greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Sedimentary and isotopic evidence suggests that periods of extensive forest growth corresponded with lower atmospheric CO2 levels, while declines in forest coverage allowed carbon to return to the atmosphere. Antarctica's forests were thus active participants in the long-term balancing of Earth's climate. Interactions with neighboring continents influenced not only the spread of life, but also climate patterns. As Antarctica drifted southward, its position affected ocean currents that circulated heat around the planet. The gradual separation from South America and Australia allowed the Antarctic circumpolar current to form, isolating the continent thermally. Yet before full isolation, warm waters from lower latitudes flowed toward Antarctica, helping maintain temperate conditions that allowed forests to thrive. These interactions show that the continent's climate and ecosystems were tied closely to global processes, with local forests responding to changes in oceanic and atmospheric circulation. Studying Antarctica's forests helps scientists understand Earth's climate history. The combination of fossil evidence, sediment layers, and isotopic data provides a record of temperature, precipitation, and ecosystem response over tens of millions of years. By comparing Antarctic forests with those of other polar regions in the past, such as northern high-latitude forests during the Cretaceous, researchers can track patterns of adaptation, migration, and extinction. Fossil comparisons reveal that polar forests, while subject to long periods of darkness and seasonal extremes, could sustain rich biodiversity, including plants, insects, and small vertebrates. The fossil record shows that forests in Antarctica persisted under conditions very different from today. Long winter nights, cooler summers, and shifting precipitation patterns shaped the evolution of species. Trees developed growth rings that recorded seasonal changes, while spores and seeds adapted to withstand extended periods without sunlight. These adaptations are mirrored in other high-latitude forests of the past, such as those found in northern Canada and Siberia, indicating convergent evolution in polar ecosystems. Understanding these patterns informs scientists about the limits of forest resilience and the ways ecosystems respond to changing climates. Antarctica's forests were also a source of nutrients for global ecosystems. Rivers carried organic matter from inland forests to coastal areas and shallow seas, feeding marine life. Decomposed plant material enriched sediments, supporting microbial and invertebrate communities. Fossilized shells and fish remains in coastal. Sediments show that these waters were productive. Linking terrestrial forests to marine ecosystems, the flow of nutrients from forests to oceans illustrates how Antarctica's ecosystems contributed to regional and global ecological networks. Paleogeographic reconstructions indicate that Antarctica served as a bridge for the dispersal of plant and animal species across the southern continents. Seeds and spores could travel through connected land masses, while animals, particularly small reptiles and mammals, may have migrated along forested corridors. Fossils found in multiple southern continents share similar morphologies and growth patterns, highlighting the continuity of ecosystems. Antarctica's position as a southern landmass with extensive forests made it a keystone for understanding the distribution of life in the past, linking distant regions ecologically and biogeographically. Antarctic forests influenced Earth's climate not only through carbon sequestration, but also by affecting albedo and moisture cycling. Dense forests absorb sunlight, moderating local temperatures, while transpiration from leaves contributed to precipitation patterns. Wetlands and swamps retained water, slowly releasing it into rivers and lakes, maintaining humidity in surrounding areas. These processes showed that Antarctica's forests were active components of the climate system, shaping temperature, rainfall, and atmospheric composition locally and globally. Comparisons with other warm polar regions provide additional insight. Northern high-latitude forests of the Cretaceous period also experienced long periods of darkness, yet supported large conifers, ferns, and flowering plants. Fossil evidence from these regions mirrors that of Antarctica, demonstrating similar ecological strategies and adaptations. In both cases, polar forests thrived despite extreme seasonality, relying on reproductive timing, leaf morphology, and soil conditions to survive. Studying these forests in context allows scientists to understand the common principles that govern polar ecosystems under warm climates. In conclusion, Antarctica's forests were part of a connected and dynamic southern world. They linked continents, maintained biodiversity, contributed to carbon cycling, and influenced climate patterns. Fossil evidence, sediment analysis, and comparisons with other polar forests reveal that Antarctica was a keystone in prehistoric ecosystems. Understanding its forests provides insights into Earth's climate history, showing how ecosystems adapt to extreme conditions, interact with global processes, and leave lasting imprints in rock and fossil records. These forests, once thriving at the edge of the world, remind us that even the most distant and cold regions can host rich, interconnected life under the right conditions. The story of Antarctica's ancient forests continues to influence science today. Fossils, coal beds, and sediment layers from the continent provide a record of how life responded to long-term climate change. By studying these remains, scientists gain insight into how ecosystems adapt, survive, or collapse when conditions shift. Patterns preserved in leaves, growth rings, pollen, and soil reveal how plants coped with changes in temperature, light, and moisture over millions of years. These lessons are invaluable in understanding both the past and potential future of our planet's climate. Modern forests offer a lens to interpret ancient Antarctic ecosystems. Temperate forests in southern South America, New Zealand, and Australia share similarities with the forests that once grew on the southernmost continent. Trees with annual growth rings, ferns that thrive under dense canopy cover, and plants adapted to seasonal light changes provide living analogues to ancient species. By comparing fossilized plant structures to living examples, paleobotanists reconstruct the growth patterns, reproduction, and seasonal responses of Antarctic forests. This approach bridges deep time with observable biology, allowing researchers to make accurate predictions about forest dynamics under changing climates. Fossils from Antarctica also inform climate models. The presence of coal, extensive plant debris, and specific leaf types indicates periods of high productivity and warm conditions. Conversely, layers showing reduced plant abundance, thinner coal seams, and sparse pollen reveal cooling trends. By mapping these changes over millions of years, scientists calibrate models that simulate how greenhouse gases, ocean currents, and continental positions influence global temperature. The data provide context for modern climate change, showing both the resilience and vulnerability of ecosystems to prolonged shifts in temperature and carbon dioxide levels. Antarctica serves as a natural laboratory for extreme climate studies. Its record encompasses greenhouse conditions, the transition to ice ages, and the eventual formation of permanent ice sheets. Fossil forests and sediments preserved beneath ice or exposed in rock formations allow researchers to study life at the margins of habitability. plants and animals adapted to months of darkness, fluctuating temperatures, and changing precipitation provide examples of resilience that can inform modern conservation strategies. The continent's past demonstrates how life can endure long-term stress while highlighting the limits of adaptation. The fossil record also emphasizes the interconnectedness of ecosystems. Ancient Antarctic forests were not isolated. They interacted with coastal rivers, wetlands, and shallow seas. Nutrient flow from plants to oceans supported marine life, while terrestrial habitats allowed insects, reptiles, and small mammals to thrive. Understanding these interactions helps scientists reconstruct food webs and ecological dynamics, providing a holistic view of past environments. These lessons are relevant for contemporary ecosystems under stress from human-induced climate change, illustrating how disruptions in one part of a system can ripple across the whole. Studying Antarctica's forests reveals cycles of growth and decline that mirror broader Earth systems. Fossil evidence shows periods of expansion during warm intervals, followed by contraction during cooling trends. Trees adapted to long summer days, and winter darkness produced growth rings that capture environmental changes. Coal beds indicate high plant productivity, while mudstone layers preserve evidence of seasonal flooding and soil development. By examining these layers, scientists can read the history of climate change and ecosystem response with remarkable detail, providing a guide to understanding the resilience of life over geological timescales. The knowledge gained from Antarctic fossils also enhances predictions for future climates. By analyzing how ancient ecosystems responded to elevated greenhouse gases, scientists estimate thresholds beyond which forests and other ecosystems struggle to survive. The record demonstrates that even resilient systems eventually reach tipping points, leading to collapse or transformation. These insights help policymakers, conservationists, and researchers plan for sustainable management of forests and other habitats in a warming world. The lessons of Antarctica's forests are thus directly relevant to challenges faced today on every continent. In addition to climate insights, Antarctica inspires scientific curiosity and global collaboration. Research stations, international expeditions, and modern technologies enable detailed study of fossils and sediments in a harsh environment. Teams of geologists, paleobotanists, and climatologists work together to uncover, document, and analyze specimens. Satellite imagery, drones, and ground-penetrating radar complement fieldwork, revealing fossil-rich layers hidden beneath ice and rock. The continent remains a living laboratory, demonstrating the value of teamwork, precision, and careful observation in understanding Earth's history. Reflecting on Antarctica's past, the contrast between ice today and forests yesterday is striking. Thick ice sheets now cover most of the continent, hiding valleys once filled with trees, rivers, and wetlands. Fossils and sediments preserve these forests, offering a tangible link to a time when Antarctica was green and productive. The record reminds us that climates and ecosystems are dynamic, capable of dramatic shifts over millions of years. Ancient forests survived long periods of change, yet they were ultimately overtaken by ice, highlighting both the resilience and fragility of life under extreme environmental stress. Antarctica's forests teach enduring lessons. They reveal how ecosystems respond to long-term climate change, how life adapts to extreme conditions, and how interconnected continents and oceans influence ecological dynamics. Fossils provide a guide to past climates, informing models of future change and illustrating the processes that shape our world. By studying these ancient forests, scientists gain insight into resilience, adaptation, and ecological balance. The continent's icy present preserves a story of forest past, offering knowledge and perspective for understanding the challenges facing ecosystems in a rapidly changing world. Ultimately, the legacy of Antarctica's forests lies in their ability to inform and inspire. They remind us that even the most remote and inhospitable regions once supported life, and that Earth's climate and ecosystems are deeply interconnected. Coal beds, sediment layers, fossilized leaves, and spores provide a record of resilience, transformation, and adaptation over tens of millions of years. In the ice of today lies the memory of forests that thrived in a warmer world. Studying these forests allows scientists to glimpse the deep history of life, understand the forces that shape our planet, and learn lessons that are crucial for preserving ecosystems in the future. Antarctica continues to be a window into the past and a laboratory for the future. By combining fossil evidence, sedimentary records, and modern research techniques, scientists can explore how life responds to extreme changes, how climates shift over time, and how ecosystems recover or collapse. The continent's forests, long buried beneath ice, remain a testament to Earth's dynamic history. Their story is not merely about trees and plants. It is about life's resilience, the interconnectedness of ecosystems, and the lessons we can carry forward as we face our own environmental challenges. In the end, Antarctica stands as a symbol of the deep connections between climate, life, and the Earth's surface. The frozen land of today is a memory of forests past, yet these memories continue to teach, guide, and inspire. By studying the fossil record, scientists unlock secrets of adaptation, resilience, and environmental change. Ancient forests beneath the ice remind us that climates shift, ecosystems transform, and life responds in ways both delicate and profound. Antarctica's forests are a legacy for science, a record of Earth's past, and a guide for understanding the future.